Hello YouTube friends, Ben Ochart here. Thank you so much for tuning in. Let's talk a little bit about heaters, about these things. The heaters and the wattage that you need to really keep your aquariums comfortable for your fish. It's definitely different here in Nashville, Tennessee. The requirements that I'm discovering are very different from what they were in Southern California. Let's go ahead and talk about it. If you're new to the channel, be sure to hit that sub and that bell and that thumbs up if you're so inclined, and that tells YouTube that you're enjoying and getting something out of the content of this channel, and encourages YouTube to recommend the channel to other fish keepers. So let's talk about heaters. Let me tell you what I had to do. I had 150 watt cobalt heaters. I still have, they're just not plugged in now. I had 150 watt cobalt heaters in the tanks behind me. And those heaters were struggling. And by that what I mean is they were, first of all, they're doing two things. They were struggling and they were reporting incorrect temperatures. They were telling me that the tanks were at 78, but they were flashing because I had the heaters set up to 82. So they were flashing and telling me that the tank was 78 and it was trying to get the tank up to 82, and it really couldn't do it. The true temperature, as I discussed in a prior video called Heaters Lie, the true temperature was around 75 degrees when cross-checked with the calibrated controllers and also a digital thermometer. So what was going on was that those heaters, 150 watts, was struggling to heat 55 gallons. So I ended up having to get some heavy duty heaters that I happen to have on hand, and these are 300 watt Eheims. They're very huge, which makes them a little bit awkward, as you can see, for an aquarium that isn't very tall. You have to use them sometimes horizontally. The fact that they're very long, though, is good in that they disperse, they spread out the heat. So with this kind of a heater, especially if you're using it horizontally and the heat is rising, and you use something like a power head or something that creates water movement, you're gonna have a tank that has a nice even distribution of heat. I would prefer if they offered those heaters with some kind of a plastic shield, like you see in this little aqua top heater here. This has a plastic shield. Why I like these shields is because when cichlids become larger, and even the viejas and the red shoulder severums, when these fish put on weight and bulk, if they get startled, they can bang very hard into a heater, and that glass against glass can sometimes result in a catastrophe. So I prefer a plastic shield on the heater. The downside of that, of course, is that it blocks a little bit of the dispersal of the heat, but that's probably not that big a deal. At any rate, my advice is if you're in the middle of a cold snap like I am, and you can see here, I mean, it's very cold and it looks like it's going to get colder. My fish room is in a garage. It's insulated, but it still gets cold in here. It's not part of the central heating of the house. That might get remedied in the future, but it isn't the case now. I have a small floor heater that I normally keep at 68. It's set at 75 right now, and it's still a little chilly in here. So the tanks are going to be, the heaters in the tanks are going to be struggling to keep the tank warm. And I'm discovering that 300 watts works well in a 55 gallon. It took the tanks and it gradually took them up to a temperature that is acceptable. That being said, the heaters are set at about 82 and the tanks are at about 78 to 80, somewhere in there. So they're still working, their lights are staying on, they're still working hard to keep up with the with the weather that we're in, but they are keeping the tank at a much more comfortable level with, I think, more efficiently than those 150 watt cobalts were doing. Now, this is not a knock on the cobalt heaters, those are great heaters, perhaps 2 of those 150s, you know, plugged into a 2-plug heater controller. Perhaps that would be fine for a 55 when it's 10 degrees outside. Perhaps. And some folks would argue that that would be a way of distributing the heat a bit more comfortably. So that might work. However, for now, I'm going to rely on these big beasts, these big Eheim monsters, and to do the job until this cold snap passes, which should be in about a week or two. This is very unusual for Nashville to get this cold. So at any rate, that's my tip. Cross-check your temperature, and if your heater is struggling, go up to 5 watts or more of heater for the number of gallons that you're trying to heat. Otherwise, your heater is going to be working like crazy, telling you that it's at 78 when in fact your tank is 75, 74, and that's not where you want it. Okay, so that's it for me. I hope this helps, and especially with the weather that we're experiencing. And comment below. Let me know what your experience has been using heaters, and especially in cold weather. Something I was not that familiar with. I mean, cold in California is 50 degrees, maybe high 30s, mid 40s. Very rare, very rare. And you keep the house warm, and it's not that big a deal. A fish room in a garage with 10 degrees outside, that's a whole different story. And so I'm definitely learning as I go. So comment below, share your experience, share your thoughts. I'd love to hear it. And I hope to see you on Saturday at the Cichlids and Coffee live stream. All right, thank you so much.